Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to all of you. I'm so pleased that you're here with us for the launch of Reggie Williams' new book, Resilient by Nature. And so glad to see so many of you in the audience. I know many more will be trickling in as we go through our introductions. But I want to update you on what's going to happen tonight. Now, my name is Georgia Court, and I'm the proprietor at Bookstore One, Sarasota. And we are going to have a cast of wonderful characters as part of this evening's events, and I hope you will enjoy it. What we plan to do is to have a 30-minute or so discussion with our three principals today. That will be followed by a question and answer period. I ask you to put your questions in the chat box. And I realize that every device is a little different, but at least on mine, it's at the bottom and there's like a little thought bubble and it has the word chat under it. So that's where you ask your questions. The questions will be taken care of toward the end of the session, and we'll just keep track of those as we go. Also, I'd like to welcome, in addition to our audience online with us right now, some audience members who are coming from around the country because they have been invited by other booksellers. And those participating booksellers are Still North Books, which is in Hanover, New Hampshire. And the reason they're here is because that's where Reggie went to college, to Dartmouth, and where he played championship football. We're also welcoming the customers of Totem Books in Flint, Michigan. And the reason they're on this call is that Flint, Michigan is where Reggie was born and raised. And in fact, the owner of that bookstore played high school football with Reggie when they were both kids. So that's why they're there. And we also have Smith and Hannon Bookstore in Cincinnati, Ohio. And that one is pretty obvious because that's where Reggie played football with the Bengals for over 14 years. So welcome to everybody who's here in the audience. And one more hint too, that if you want to see the speaker, the single speaker who's speaking, look for speaker view and click on that. If you want to simply look at everybody who's on the call and scroll through everybody and you can see all the pictures, then you go to gallery view. Okay. First, I would like to introduce Elsie Souza. Elsie, please unmute and say hello.
Hi, everybody. Good evening.
Right. Elsie is the events manager at Bookstore One. She's passionate about sports and politics, I can tell you that for a fact. And in the interest of full disclosure, Cincinnati holds a very dark spot in her heart because of the Reds defeating the Red Sox in 1975. And in case you didn't guess from her accent yet, she's from Boston. Elsie is particularly proud of having a significant role in bringing the Orioles to Sarasota for spring training. I'd also like to introduce you to Jarrett Bell. Jarrett, please unmute.
Ta-da!
Okay. There he is. There he is. Okay. Jarrett Bell has covered pro football for USA Today Sports since 1993. He also served for 4 years as a contributor at ESPN, primarily featured as a panelist on NFL Insiders and Sports Center. He has won dozens of writing awards from both USA Today and the Pro Football Writers of America. He has been a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame Selection Committee since 1997, and since that year, he has served on the media panel that selects the Super Bowl MVP. He's also done hundreds of radio and TV interviews, including CBS, CNBC, ESPN, CNN, Fox News, and now I hope the highlight of his career, the Bookstore One Network.
Yes.
All right. Now I'd like to introduce Reggie Williams himself. And Reggie, I am looking for, there you are. There you are. So I've asked you to unmute as well. Okay.
Hello there. Glad to be here.
Welcome, Reggie. Reggie is a former NFL linebacker and college football Hall of Famer. During his 14 years with the Cincinnati Bengals, he was honored as the Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year for his community service and later served on the Cincinnati City Council while active as a pro athlete. He was instrumental in building a sports-themed empire during his tenure as a Disney executive. He was GM for the New York, New Jersey Knights of the World League of American Football, and as an NFL executive, he established the first NFL youth education town. A native of Flint, Michigan, where he attended Southwestern Classical Academy, he is also a graduate of Dartmouth College. And before we get into our actual chat, I'm going to try, I hope successfully, to share with you a video that I think may help explain for you all a little bit about what started Reggie's quest to write this book. And bear with me while I find my screen share button. Okay. Okay.
You might remember Reggie Williams. For 14 years, he was one of the best linebackers in Cincinnati Bengals history. He led the team in tackles several years. In his career, he's second only to Ken Riley in total tackles. He played in 2 Super Bowls. He was also very active locally in civic affairs, to the extent that he was also a Cincinnati city councilman. You might remember Reggie Williams. You don't remember him like this.
This is beyond morphine. Morphine is baby food to pain.
Inquirer photojournalist Jeff Swinger and I went to Orlando, Reggie's home, for 3 days last month to visit with Reggie. He's 58 years old and disabled. Since he retired in 1990, he's had more than 20 operations on his right knee. The knee is so bad, the next operation could involve amputation. We invite you to watch and read this incredible story of one man's courage, determination, and grace. It will change the way you view professional athletes and the sometimes tragic consequences of the games they play.
Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Elsie to interview Jarrett and Reggie, and don't forget to put your questions in the chat box.
Well, my dear Pied Piper Reggie, you know, you always have someone who comes to your community and changes it all. And Reggie, you have become dear to all of us in Sarasota, especially Bookstore One. But I want to give a shout out before we go on to Julia, the special woman in your life. And I want to read something that you wrote about her. So it says, for my mother to emphasize that despite being hearing impaired, despite being African American, despite being half Hispanic, despite being relatively poor, through education, you can accomplish anything. So Reg, tell me about this woman and Eli and your amazing family from Flint, Michigan.
Well, I appreciate you starting there, Elsie. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming on to this book launch. I want to thank Jared for the brotherhood that we experienced over the last year and collaborating on the book. I want to thank Georgia and Elsie, you yourself, because this is the place where the ideas started. And so the begin this evening talking about the significant influence that my mom had on this book coming to fruition is a great place to start. I remember in Flint growing up, it wasn't as dire a city as people are painting the story now. It was a great town to grow up in. We had a great library, which I loved. We had a great Flint Institute of Art. We had a planetarium. The Mott Foundation was very influential in creating a positive quality of life. But my mom always pointed out that I was born in 1954, the year of the Brown versus Board of Education decision, and you could accomplish anything that you wanted in your dreams through education. And that's why the library was such a special place for me. My mom would drop us off every Saturday. We spend all day going up and down the aisles. And I remember one day in the 4th grade, and this is why this is such a bucket list item for me. I remember in the 4th grade coming out so enthusiastic about the books that I had checked out and about all the stories I had read during my day. And I enthusiastically told my mom, I promised her that I was going to write a book for her one day. This was before I even played football, not knowing what the book was going to be about. But I wanted to live my life in such a way that somehow it would be book worthy.
Oh, you are just amazing. Let me ask Jared something. Jared, so tell me, why choose Reggie to collaborate a book with you? I mean, I'm sure you've had other offers. And what came out of this philosophy of working with Reggie?
Yes, that's a great point. I have had different people approach me about writing their biographies. This one just kind of fell into my lap because one of my former editors at USA Today is friends with Debbie Englander from Post Hill, and Reggie had actually started the process of developing a book with Post Hill, and they went about to find him a writer. And as things happen so often in this industry, someone says, hey, I know someone who would be good, this and that. The interesting thing, though, is that everyone else that I've talked to about writing a book has been someone that I know, and we have a relationship, a rapport. I didn't know Reggie Williams. I knew his story. I knew of Reggie Williams. He hired a couple of my good buddies at Disney, so I've known his impact and the type of leader he was from people firsthand. But they put me together with Reggie, and we just kind of clicked and hit it off. And it's been more than I can ever expect because he has such an amazing story. And this book could have been 3 times bigger than it is, just because he's had such an enriching life and such a great journey. A lot of resilience, obviously, into the title of the book, and just so inspirational.
So Reg, take me through high school. Why football? How did that come to pass for you?
Well, football became a sport that I chose because I had some great friends. I think even on this call is one of my best friends in high school, Ricky Taylor, who was a neighbor, lived on the same street as I. And in the 9th grade, when I first planned on playing football, I ended up falling out of a tree against my mother's wishes and had such a bad concussion that I couldn't put a helmet on all year. At that same time, my friend Ricky Taylor had his body in a full body cast. And so neither of us could play football. So the following year, in order to make the team, we both worked out extra hard. And so football became a passion. I still remember the first touchdown I scored as a junior on a deflected pass. And then I didn't have any major aspirations that I was ever going to be a big-time football player. I was academically oriented. I had prepared my whole life to get a scholarship to go to the University of Michigan and be a doctor. I wanted to play for the Wolverines. I just wanted to run out of the tunnel in the big house, and I'd been satisfied. And I had a full academic ride in Michigan, and Bo Schembechler came to my high school in front of my head coach, Darsh Christensen, and told me that I wasn't good enough to be a Wolverine. And it was that night that my father said he'd work a 3rd job and be able to afford to send me to Dartmouth College. And Dartmouth College became a love affair, not only academically, but with football. My perspective on my capabilities increased because I had the chip on my shoulder that came from Bo Schembechler telling me I wasn't good enough.
Well, if you listen to Julia and Eli, you'd know that you were good enough. But, you know, I did have a pang in my heart when I read about the fact, you know, that Michigan did not want Reggie Williams. This is not a good thing. But Dartmouth College, in the end, has served you well your entire life. Such a wonderful opportunity. And so now we go off to Dartmouth College. And I know you have many friends that have evolved from Dartmouth. So tell me about your incredible football career there.
It began on the very first day, and that story is detailed in my book, so I won't give it away.
Right.
But it began the very first day at Dartmouth. I knew no one, and it was such a different place, and it seemed so off-putting initially that I was challenged to assert myself. And in asserting myself, I gained a nickname that I've carried for the rest of my life since then. Is Boomer. And the Boomer came from hitting a guy so hard that it reverberated amongst all of the green hills of New Hampshire. And one of the guys on the team, Fairfax Hackley III, he shouted out, "Boomer!" And everyone's called me Boomer, who was on that team and at Dartmouth College ever since.
Well, that's pretty incredible. And knowing the beautiful green hills and mountains up there, that was quite a boom. And for all of you who will read Reggie's book, just so you know, throughout his book, he has different parts of it that are called boom blocks, and they're great, and you should really enjoy them. So tell me about your academic excellence at Dartmouth, but also, I mean, you go in the College Hall of Fame, am I right about that?
Yes, I'm very proud to be in the College Football Hall of Fame since 1954, which is when the Ivy League first started. There have been a couple of African Americans that have been in the College Football Hall of Fame, but they played before 1954, before it was officially the Ivy League. So since the Ivy League has started in 1954, I stand on their shoulders to be the only African American from the Ivy League that's in the College Football Hall of Fame. And the the prerequisite is that you have to be an All-American. So that is the differentiator. There's been some great Ivy League players since 1954 who've been African American, but none of them have had the prerequisite of being an All-American as well. I think of Calvin Hill, you know, who was a great player for the Dallas Cowboys to help get them a Super Bowl ring. I think he was a Rookie of the Year, but he didn't get that prerequisite of being an All-American while he played at Yale.
Well, we're very proud of you for being All-American and being our All-American. So good for you, Reg.
But
so
you know,
now
the one thing I will add, because I don't want to just be perceived as a jock, okay?
Oh,
and,
but you're not.
But, you know, I know an Ivy Leaguer, you know, you have to sort of represent in some respect. And so,
That's right.
you know, I was a psychology major, and my senior thesis was published in the American Psychology Journal. And my thesis revolved around a sort of hypothetical NFL combine. Ultimately, what it turned out to be, basically an evaluation physically and psychologically of what were the ideal traits of an athlete per every position in the NFL. I was trying to study how I needed to step up, get to another level of performance, not just physically, but mentally and psychologically, in order to make the quantum leap from Dartmouth College to the NFL, especially as a linebacker.
Well, I have to tell you, as I read your book, it struck me how calculated you are. And I thought of Michael Lewis and writing about, you know, writing about Moneyball, and you struck me as someone who thought everything out methodically, so how you were going to get to the next place. And that you've done your entire life, so good for you. So now, how did you decide you were going to the NFL?
I got drafted. You know, you don't get a chance to
Yeah.
choose that profession. So
No, I understand that, but were you shocked? What was your reaction?
We write about it in the book in terms of what actually was going on in my mind on the day of the draft. The draft was nowhere near as big a spectacle then as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So I was drafted by the Canadian Football League in the first round, as I think we discussed before, and that gave me the feedback that yes, I would get a chance to play in the NFL, but making the leap from being an Ivy Leaguer to the NFL was something that wasn't a given. And not only was Bo Schembechler from Michigan someone who didn't think that I was good enough, when I got to the Hula Bowl, after coming out of Dartmouth, my defensive coordinator was a guy named George Hill, who was the defensive coordinator for Ohio State. And he too felt I wasn't good enough, even though I was an All-American then. And he made fun of me all week. He told me that he wasn't going to start me, even though I accepted the invitation because I expected to start at outside linebacker in some way, shape, or form. And he basically benched me before I even got there. And when he put me in the game in the second half, only played one play that whole game. He said, the only reason I'm putting you in there is because I have to. And so I've overcome, in terms of being resilient by nature, a number of different circumstances of adversity, trying to prove other people right, and in negative circumstances, trying to turn a negative into a positive. And so there are a number of stories from Flint to Dartmouth to Cincinnati, to life after Cincinnati, to joining the executive role at Walt Disney World, to dealing with the myriad of operations that have been a result of really playing in the moment. And that's how I played. So a lot of the benefits that I've realized after retiring from football is weighed against the fact when I played football, I played all out. I really didn't expect to survive the game. I just wanted to somehow see a Super Bowl ring on this finger.
Well, I think Jarrett and Reggie should speak about the NFL now and what's going on. And I know at some point in time, Reg, there's a film that Georgia will show, a second film. But Jarrett, do you all want to talk about the pros and cons of the NFL? I mean, Reggie really speaks to the issue there. And having all the injuries you've had, Reggie, do you still love football? I mean, and what do you say to parents out there who are watching this and they're saying this extraordinary man has had so many operations and, has had such pain in his life. So what do you say, Jared? And what do you say, Reggie, about that?
You want to go, Reggie?
No, you go first, man.
Yeah, I think, obviously, if you're going to be an elite athlete like Reggie and the many players in the NFL, you really have to love the game. And there's a definite sacrifice to that, and there's a definite risk factor to that. And, I think the league has done several things in recent years, pushed by the Players Union to make the game safer. But, Reggie can tell you that you're never totally safe, and that the protections that players need goes far beyond the rules, because when you start talking about lifelong health care and things of that nature, you're talking about real people. I think one thing that just really strikes me about the NFL as a product, the NFL as, a consumer vehicle, is so often people fans just don't really appreciate that these are human beings playing the game. And there's 53 guys on a roster. 2/3 of them will be out of the league in 2 years because the numbers cycle to that degree. But these are human beings with human stories and human sacrifices. Reggie played 14 years. That is so rare. The average NFL career is 3.5 years. We know some of the star players, pick a name, Aaron Rodgers, for example, a guy who's lasted, over 10 years, but it's really rare. And so I think the thing that just always strikes me about the NFL, and as I've covered this league for so long, I think I've always tried to identify with the players as human beings first. And actually as a reporter, not to toot my own horn, but that's kind of been my approach to it in terms of trying to, navigate the NFL world, to establish sources and to develop rapport with players. It's always as human beings first. Now, I did have a first cousin, the late Larry Bethea, who played football, was a first-round draft pick of the Dallas Cowboys. So he exposed me to, a great vision of the NFL from the inside. But as I've gone on through my career, that's the thing. And now, when you talk about what's going on in the NFL, in addition to obviously trying to play in a pandemic this season, which is another way of involving how you humanize the game for the participants and the safety that has to be there. But we talk about these social justice issues. And
Right.
the climate has definitely changed this year, but you go back 4 years to Colin Kaepernick first taking a knee and the outpouring of resistance to him, and now we've come a few years down the road, and I think the country has changed, but the NFL, in terms of how it will definitely try to process this, has evolved as well. And even the players themselves. We saw some players this year put out a video after the Floyd killing in May that had never, ever done anything in terms of speaking out for social justice, but they were just so moved. I'm talking about Patrick Mahomes, Michael Thomas, Dak Prescott, and I, like a lot of people in this nation. So you wonder sometimes, okay, does the NFL really have a responsibility to address these social issues? I think that's just part of the burden that players, as Reggie did in his day, carry as part of their responsibility, because they know that they have a tremendous platform. And so there is a convergence between humanity, sports and entertainment, and just, decency in terms of social issues. And there's no place like the NFL that kind of captures all of those things in one place, because the NFL is so popular.
So, Reg, what do you have to say about all that with all your injuries? And I know you would have loved to have been the NFL commissioner. So tell me what, and you're one of the pre-1993 players. So you have issues too that have to do with healthcare. And maybe you want to speak to that to the audience too.
Well, one of the things I will say is I want to thank the National Football League Players Association and the National Football League for their extension of the collective bargaining agreement, which did finally result in some financial benefits for some of the medical problems that I've had. And they're also making some modest increases to reimburse us for Medicare now that I'm on Medicare. So it's not all as dire as it seems, but the one thing about the book, it is an homage to the game in a very, very intimate way. There are 13 chapters, and there are 13 boom boxes. And as circumstances would turn out, 13 is the number of my very good friend, Ken Riley, number 13, the greatest player from the Cincinnati Bengals, has more interceptions than anyone in Bengals history. He unfortunately passed away recently. But the one reason I talk about this book is really about relationships and friendships, and nowhere is it more impactful and intense than on a football field. And the very first time I stepped on the field was my rookie year, our first time in Cleveland. And the reason I'm on the field is because the starting right outside linebacker got hurt. And so they put Glenn Cameron in place of him because they weren't sure that an Ivy Leaguer would be able to play in the NFL yet. And my whole training camp, I was playing left outside linebacker. Every rep I had was left outside linebacker, but it was the right outside linebacker that got hurt. And so when I first entered the field, it's the first time I ever played right outside linebacker, the first time I ever got into huddle next to Ken Riley. And he's the only guy that was also a fraternity brother of mine. And he gave me the fraternity sort of shake and handshake and welcome into the huddle. And from that play, I started a right outside linebacker, a position I had never played before for the next 14 years of my NFL career. So those are the kinds of transformations that occur by trying to compete on the level of the athletes that compete in the National Football League. You get your one chance and you try to take the most of it.
Well, you certainly did for 14 years. That's pretty amazing. So we do have to speak about your injuries, which have been substantial and life-changing, and resilience, as Jared can attest to, and everyone who's read the book or will read the book or just knows you. So what can you tell us about that? Or how much do you want to say about it?
Well, I'll just say this. I sort of end the book, at the very end of the book, I thank the village of doctors, all the doctors that have sort of sewn me together, that have allowed me to be a guinea pig, because I definitely was a guinea pig in 1986 when I became the first NFL player to have microfracture surgery. It wasn't even called microfracture surgery at the time. And I was able to come back from that and continue to play. But that is the source of a lot of the discomfort I've had physically. It's the medical technology. The very first knee operation I had, which was simply a cartilage tear, was in 1979. And at that time, they opened up the leg completely and took out all of the cartilage. And so that left me playing for the rest of my career, however long it was, bone on bone. And so by 1986, after that season, even though I was playing very well, in fact, in the book, we have a evaluation of how I was in 1986, which is very rarely seen these days, what they judged you on. But I was at the top of my game, but physically I couldn't go on. And so fortunately I had a new experience and was able supposedly play one more year. And that year was 1987 and the NFL went on strike. There's a lot more to that story in the book. But the following year was 1988 because I didn't want to go out in a strike year. And that year I was also a Cincinnati city councilman. And the first person ever introduced in the starting lineup for a Super Bowl, which I always remember, starting at right outside linebacker, number 57, Councilman Reggie Williams. So the opportunity to be a part of the Cincinnati community was so special, and there's always a special place in my heart and love for Cincinnati, Ohio.
Oh, how wonderful. But meanwhile, your heart was broken because you went to 2 Super Bowls and you don't have that ring, Reg. How bad is that?
Well, we talk about that, and it's sort of, the book is about the mental anguish, which can be just as daunting as the physical anguish. And on either case, whether you're dealing with tragic things emotionally, or whether you're dealing with terrible circumstances physically, you know, there's a singular approach. There's a singular confidence one has in themselves. And actually through, you know, living the life of Invictus, you know, which I learned my senior year at Dartmouth, and which is told in the book, and which I'll recite real quick now, even though it's supposed to come later, but you know, the
Oh, you want to do it now? Okay, you're the star. You can do anything you want. Go ahead.
Well, Invictus was written by William Ernest Henley. And it was at a time in England in the 1800s where he himself was very sick and about to lose his leg. And he came up with this sort of philosophy, which has been repeated by many over many decades and years. And it goes, out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged the punishments to scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Thank you.
You certainly are. And you know what? I'm going to applaud and tell you that I think you're next, you should become an actor now. Although I think you might be an actor already, but we can get you on the stage. Good for you. That is a very beautiful thought for us. And so I want to ask Jarrett and you, before we go on to Disney, where you worked there, who were some of the special people that you remember from football, like your best opponents, or for Jarrett, the great players you've seen? And I hope you might mention Tom Brady and that, but I'll just be kind about that. But who Reggie, do you think of when you think of, you know, great opponents? People like to know that.
Well, you know, in the book, we answer that question. So, you know, Jarrett's, you know, right ahead of you. And, you know, I don't want to give away the book, you know, completely, you know, but, you know, and there's a unique choice that I made in the book, you know, in choosing, you know, the refrigerator over Earl Campbell. But, you know, it's worth the read. But certainly, you know, a big part of what I enjoy most is the ongoing relationships, the lifetime relationships you have with so many teammates and so many opponents. Joe Kelly, who played a decade behind me, but became one of my best friends, and I'm still currently on the board of directors with his organization that has group homes in Cincinnati that take care of a lot of well-needed foster kids. But you develop a relationship that lasts a lifetime because of the intensity you put into each other, trying to make each other a world champion. And so after the game is over, you know, helping and really being a positive force in the lives of kids is just like winning a world championship, in my opinion.
And Jarrett, well said by Reggie, but do you have any thoughts on great players you've seen, or just?
Oh, totally, totally. And let's start with Tom Brady, since you mentioned him. So I guess it was about 2 years ago, I was up in Foxborough for a game, and after the game talking to Brady, and I said, hey, you know, I saw your book in the bookstore and I was getting ready to buy it, but the thing was like this big, the TB12 method. He says, oh, well, I'll send you one. So sure enough, a couple of weeks later, here comes a book from Tom Brady, and he autographed it and stuff like that. So since we're on a book launch and it's TB12, okay, I'm gonna actually see them this week in New Orleans. So we'll see if you're a former Patriot, still has his stuff with the Bucks. But, you know, when I think about, and Brady, obviously one of the greatest players, and I've covered this league since, you know, the 1980s. And so I've seen a lot of players come down the pike. And I think when I think of it and listening to Reggie talk about relationships too, that's really kind of how I'm struck with some of the players that I have been associated with and have covered, to not only appreciate their greatness as athletes and their skill as competitors, but also what they bring in terms of, you know, their character or their personality or, you know, the human traits to the game. And so before USA Today, and I've been at USA Today for 27 years, but I covered the 49ers for 3 years and I covered the Cowboys for 9 years. And I think of all the players that I got to see like every day. When you cover a team, you know, right now I parachute in and I go and I do a story here or there. But when you cover a team on a daily basis, you really get to know the individuals and they get to know you. I remember being in the 49ers locker room and Jesse Sapolo, the center, telling me, you have new shoes, I know it. And so you get to know players on that level. And so to that degree, I'll mention just a few real quick. And you've heard of most of these guys: Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Ronnie Lott, the Cowboys teams, even though I wasn't in Dallas, but the triplets with Michael Irvin and Troy and Emmett. But even before that, Drew Pearson, who's going into the Hall of Fame, or he's a finalist now to go into the Hall of Fame, is one guy that, you know, I remember from way back when I first started covering football for the grit and the determination he had. Tony Dorsett, Too Tall Jones. So when I think of guys and try to put together some kind of list of the greats, it really kind of starts with some of those personal relationships. And so you get to appreciate them. No doubt about that.
Well, how wonderful. So Rich, let's talk about that Disney magic that goes on in life. And that's a part of what you did. Do you want to just share some of the Disney moments with us?
He's muted.
He has muted him. Reggie, you have muted yourself.
Reggie has muted himself. That does not happen very often, okay? Let me tell you.
Well, let's see if I can get him.
No. He can't hear. Yeah. So I will say this until he gets unmuted. Reggie is such a phenomenal storyteller with a great gift for gab. So when you asked me earlier, Elsie, about collaborating with somebody, you could not collaborate with anybody better than Reggie Williams, as far as I'm concerned, because of his ability to tell a story. And as you know, he's so methodical in his thinking, and so that's what really made it easy to collaborate with him on this book, is that he could just really put it out there and tell you what he's thinking and give you, everything in terms of the structure to tell these stories. And so, that's the thing that made it easy. And I told him all through this process, this is your book, this is your voice. Just want to make sure that I'm trying to streamline it, to your benefit. And so we worked well together. But he's on now, so I could.
So, Reg,
Yes.
Tell me about your Disney experience in that Magic Kingdom.
And so I would love to go there. Before I transition, I was going to see, were we going to play this highlight film first before I start talking about Disney?
If you want to. Are you
ready?
ready?
Go here now before I go on to Disney.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
It was basically, in order to set it up, if I can, we talk quite a bit in the book about, these major moments that you have in your life. And so there were 5 plays in my career that I'm going to narrate over. The first play is the first play of Super Bowl 23. And in that play, I was told right before the game, which is detailed in the book, that I was the weak link of the Cincinnati Bengals team, and they were coming right after me. And in the first play of the game, there is a handoff from Joe Montana to Roger Craig, and they're running away from me. And I'm running, I thought they were coming after me, but instead they handed the ball off to Jerry Rice, and it was reversed, and it's a one-on-one between the best wide receiver in NFL history and me in my 13th year. And I was able to stop him after a 5-yard gain. And it starts with both angles. So you get the end zone angle and then the sideline angle. And then it's followed by 4 other plays that I will narrate. And if you can start the tape, then we'll get on the way.
There it goes.
Yes. So right here, you can see the wide open field that Joe Montana had if he had. I'm on the very right side at right outside linebacker.
And watch Montana miss the block.
Yes, he did miss the block.
See that?
Next play has, I'm on the top of the right, the guy in the white uniform. I'm going to be blitzing, and I'm going to jump over Rocky Blyer, do a 360-degree helicopter and assist on the sack of Terry Bradshaw. It was that all-out, reckless, plain abandon that I've talked about in terms of being in the game.
9.9 on the landing.
Yes, it was. This is the first play coming back from the 87 strike, and I sacked for a safety, Ron Jaworski. But you can see how my teammates embraced me after all the acrimony of a strike. And so it shows you when you're in the heat of the game, performance on the field supersedes everything off the field. This next play will be the play where I suffered my very first knee injury. Greg Pruitt is gonna tackle me after I intercepted the ball, and you're gonna see him twist my leg and bringing me down.
Oh,
And so in that respect, for the rest of my career, even though I made a great play, I will always remember Greg Pruitt in this play. And this is my first interception in the NFL. It was in my second year against Zorn. I grab it after the ball fluttered, stopped myself from going out of bounds, continued going up the sideline for my first NFL touchdown. And it would be my only interception touchdown in my 14-year career. I ended up with 16 interceptions. I ended up with 2 other touchdowns on fumble recoveries. And I also had 2 safeties in my career.
Dude,
those are the
you were
kind
moving,
of memorable
man.
moments.
You were moving on that, Boom.
I was flying, man. I was excited.
I love it. I love it. So now your football career is over, but you have ties to Dartmouth all over the place. I know that. And I believe Michael Eisner from Disney, his sons went to Dartmouth too. So, you know, you've had all these ties through the years. So now what did you do for Disney World? I think people would want to know for Walt Disney Productions.
Well, at the time that the Disney opportunity came up, I was working for the National Football League. I was the head of community relations for Super Bowl 23, and had come up with the concept of NFL Youth Education Town. So I was in the process of getting more sponsors to support the most at-risk kids in the most at-risk neighborhood in the country, perhaps. I had gone to the corporate headquarters to have lunch with a college classmate, Michael Montgomery, who was the treasurer of the company at the time. And Disney had just bought the Mighty Ducks. And he came over to the table and said, what would you do if you had the land that we have at Walt Disney World? And I really didn't know about what they owned because I'd never been to Walt Disney World or Disneyland. But I knew what I would want if I was a kid. I'd want a place just like we had in Flint, Michigan, that was that one place where all of the schools in Flint went and met to compete at Atwood Stadium. So to have a place at Walt Disney World where anyone in any sport could meet to compete, to be the world's best at what they compete for, to be in the most authentic facilities. And if you win, it's the greatest exuberance you can experience. But if you lose, you're still at the happiest place on earth. And so that's a special combination. So the fact that ESPN Wide World of Sports is a place that I conceive to be so authentic that it would draw an incremental audience of young people who also treasured their young creative sports experiences just as much as, and perhaps even more, than going to a theme park. And so that was the driver of creating a new business for Walt Disney World. And I have to compliment all of the cast members over the last, since 1997 when we opened, all of the cast members who've done such a phenomenal job of maintaining such great hospitality, such cleanliness, such authenticity. I want to thank the current Vice President, Farron Kelly, for doing such a great job with the NBA bubble, with the Major League Soccer bubble, to really do a phenomenal job of bringing sports to the world in a time where it's so needed.
Oh, Elsie,
Well, yes.
I'm going to say we should probably get to Q&A right now.
But I think Reggie has one more thing that he wants to
One
tell
more?
us. So,
Okay.
okay.
Oh, yes.
So Reg, I think you want to speak to something about a donation that you're making, Reggie.
Yeah, this is not necessarily a happy conversation, but it is a happy conversation. What you're looking for is truth and medical technology. And one of the things that I do talk about in my book, you know, after playing 14 years in the NFL and having numerous concussions while I did play, and having met Dr. Omalu, who was featured in the film Concussion, and he, in his recommendation, said that I did have CTE, and basically communicating it to me in a manner like it was a negative, and I refuse to really believe that having CTE is a death sentence. It is something that you can overcome. You need to work with others and yourself on understanding the symptoms. But one of the things that is the positive thing about it is that I've chosen to donate my brain to the Concussion Legacy Project. It's at Boston University. They do a phenomenal job. And, you know, so we'll know for sure if I did have CTE, and if so, hopefully some of the revelations will help other athletes who suffer concussions in many sports. There's many women who are suffering concussion effects playing soccer, and so a number of other sports. And so one of the positive things for anyone is if I do have CTE, which I won't know until after I'm dead, because that's the only way that you can really find out, is that anything is possible. Because if you can write a book with CTE, you can do anything.
I love you, Reggie. And Jarrett, it's been a thrill for me to have you. And so I think George is going to take it over and do some questions. Thank you. I love you, Reg.
Thank you, Elsie. Love
Yes,
you too.
thank you. Thank you both thank you all for the discussion. Yeah, we've had some questions come in, and by the way, if you're those of you who are out there, still you can add some questions to the chat. And here's a question from Nancy DeVita, who's watching this from Atlanta, and she wants to know, what was the biggest challenge to Reggie, the biggest challenge you had to overcome in your football career?
You know, probably self-confidence. You know, I mean, at the ultimate level of getting to the NFL and making the quantum leap from accomplishing everything that I did do in the Ivy League, it still was a whole different level of athletic ability. It was a whole different size in the athletes on the football field. And so it really was, you know, the confidence that you have in yourself, that you could throw your body in harm's way and survive. And you have to do that again and again and again. And it's something that I, as a psychology major, was able to convince myself that I was capable of. We tell a funny story in the book. about the second time that I run down on the kickoff my rookie year against the Green Bay Packers. And on my first run down the field, Big Coy Bacon and Big Bob Brown had sort of intimidated, you better make this tackle. And I did. And on the second run down the field of my second kickoff, there was a player on the Green Bay Packers who got hit so hard that he had the feces knocked out of him. And as he's laying on the field in those beautiful white pants with the green and gold stripe down the sides, all I could think of, wow, I never want that to happen to me. And so you got to believe that it's never going to happen to you, but I did something about it. I refused to eat the day of the game before a game. So I just had liquids. I feel if I had less stuff in my stomach, there's less to knock out.
Here's a question from Madalena Aspirus. For student athletes who want to leave college and play professional ball, either football or basketball, would you encourage them to finish or graduate first or pursue being a professional player?
It's going to depend on the individual and what their aspirations are long-term and what their, athletic skill sets are. So it's on an individual basis, but, I'm always going to encourage someone to pursue their passion. And if their passion is academic, they should pursue that. And sometimes you do have a bigger academic, artistic passion than football. And the best example I can give of that is Ernie Barnes, the acclaimed world-class artist who is no longer with us either, but his skills as an artist, even though he was a great NFL player, exceeded what he ever would be on the football field, but he became legendary as an artist. And for those that don't know Ernie Barnes, he was the artist behind JJ and Good Times. He was discovered by Norman Lear, and his most famous work of art is called Sugar Shack, and it's the cover art for Marvin Gaye's album. So it depends on the individual, and yet it's great to have dreams to pursue, and that's what Resilient by Nature is all about, because ultimately, it's about having dreams to pursue. And to Jared's point, that's why one of the boom boxes is still, what are my future bucket list? What else do you want to accomplish after something like this? And that's why I'm so appreciative once again for everyone that has been on this particular Zoom call. I see my friend Tyrone Yates, who also is an endorser of the book. And I'm not sure if you can mute him to see what his thoughts are, because he's read the book. And Tyrone Yates was a very talented Cincinnati politician that when I had the opportunity to become the general manager of the New York, New Jersey Knights, I had to pick a qualified person to take my role. And Tyrone Yates was the person I called. And Tyrone, I see you're unmuted.
I think he's unmuted, yes.
I invite you to have some commentary at this time.
Well, thank you. One of the things that's so important in the American political process are African-American elected officials like Reggie Williams, who had the kind of skill set and financial independence to have the kind of autonomy to represent the African-American community with independence and leadership, and at the same time be able to reach through the entire community. There's an anecdote, I don't know if Reggie remembers it, but his office got a call one day and there was some racial issue that was involved. And his staff member said to the caller, don't you know that Councilmember Williams is an African-American? And he says, he's not an African-American, he's a Bengal. And it shows the kind of universality of sports that Reggie has always represented. Let me just close my comment because this is your night and Mr. Bell's as well. Reggie's book provides as a biography, autobiography, a level of detail that is so rare in autobiographies as to be almost a stroke of genius. And so when this book catches on, it may end up to be and have the same reach as a book like Dr. Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk or Booker T. Washington's Up from Slavery. It is an individual classic.
Thank you. And I must say that, you know, this is a judge, so it's not just an individual with an opinion, but I really respect you, Judge Yates, and I appreciate you chiming in. Georgia?
Yes, we have a question I'm going to put this one to Jarrett, even though Reggie may want to weigh in on this. It's from Scott Osborne, and she says there's a lot of talk in recent years about changes in the game because of increases in the player's size and weight and athletic abilities and the preference for a passing game, for example. Do you think that's valid, that the game is changing, or is it just the most recent media story? So that sounds like a starting out with Jarrett question.
No, it's not. It's not just a media story. I will tell you that. The game has changed tremendously. It is continuing to evolve, and yes, into a passing league. If you compare just statistically in the style that goes behind the statistics from the time that Reggie came into the league in the mid 70s to now, it's almost a different game. It really is, because there's so much less emphasis on running and so much more emphasis on passing. And you just look at the quarterback stats, although you still have to run to win. It's kind of like you need to run when you need to run. And it's still a matter of, you know, good defense can get you to the top. But point being that you look at the scores of some of these games and you compare them to a generation ago, and the rules kind of reflect it as well. So they started liberalizing the passing rules and what defenders could do or not do in the 70s. And they've had so many rules changes since that time that just opened up the passing game. But the other thing that has happened from a rule standpoint in the NFL, there have been, you know, dozens of rules over the past decade or so that are designed for player safety. And so certain things that Reggie could have done back in his day, even, you know, a blow to the head now is, you know, it's such a flagrant foul now compared to what it was a generation ago. So some of those things have been, you know, predicated by the knowledge and the science with concussions. Although if you watched football back in the 70s, you didn't need the science to say somebody's getting their head bashed in and that looks dangerous and risky. But as more and more attention has come on the concussion conundrum, if you will, and a lot of it, you mentioned Dr. Amalu, Reggie, with the movie Concussion and the discovery of CTE, a lot of things really started to change around 2007, 2008. And then when DeMaurice Smith and his team of medical experts came to the NFL Players Association, they really helped escalate that issue as a front burner one for the NFL. So things have changed in terms of trying to make the game safer, but yes, more wide open as well.
Yeah, Reggie, did you want to weigh in on that at all, or?
Yeah, it is a completely different game, but the game changed during my career as well. You know, when I first came to the game, it was a running game. You know, Jim Brown was the role model for how to have an effective offense. And you know, as we talk about in the book, in 1981, I had 11 sacks, and that's more sacks than any linebacker had ever got in NFL history. And so the game had changed all of a sudden from a defensive standpoint. You know, and so it's changed now because of the rule changes. You have to play a lot differently, and the surfaces are a lot different than when I played. I played on a horrible home field, which was a dual stadium field with the Cincinnati Reds, and we had to share that field with Shotsies, which were Mars shots to St. Bernard dogs. And that was not a fun field to share with those big, St. Bernards. Need I say more?
Yeah, right. There's one comment I'm going to pass on to you, Reggie, too. This is from LTJ, and I don't know who that is because there are initials and not a name, but he or she wants to say, it was a pleasure working for you at ESPN Wide World of Sports. So I don't know if you know who LTJ might be. And LTJ, you can change your name on here if you want to go into participants and write your name. I'll let Reggie know actually who's sending that message. But let's take one more question, I think. And this is from Steve Barrows, and I don't even know what this means, but it's for Reggie.
Okay.
He says, Reggie, was the Rattler your best or favorite teammate in the NFL? And I don't know who the Rattler is, so maybe you and Jared.
The Rattler is Ken Riley, and we talked about him. He was number 13. He played 207 games in the NFL. I played 206. And so I have to admit, if I'd have known that I could have played a couple more games, if I'd accepted Dick LeBeau's invitation to come back for my 15th year, and if he told me, man, all you need is one more game to play and you'll have more games played than any other player in NFL history, I still might have said no because Ken Riley deserved it. He was such a class act and someone that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and it's a tremendous loss for him, Barbara, his kids, and he will make the Pro Football Hall of Fame one day. I don't know when that will be, but that's a person whose accomplishment warranted. He deserved it. So the only thing I'm sad about is that he won't be alive to see it whenever it does happen. But I'm also encouraged by the fact when it does happen, he'll be up with my father and they'll both be enjoying it together.
Right. Well, let's wrap up with one more question that I think is appropriate for a wrap-up question, and it would be for Reggie. And this is from Nancy DeVita. What was the proudest moment in your professional career?
Wow, so many proud moments. I've really right now, having the chance to tell your story after all the pros and cons, after all the trials and tribulations, all the operations, all the pain, all the learnings, all the friendships, all the losses, all the pains. Being in the moment isn't just a football or a sports analogy. You have to live life in the moment, appreciating the friends and the good things that are going on around you. And especially in this pandemic time, to really aggressively seek hope and reach out to people and explore new passions that you may discover about yourself that you never would have under times that didn't challenge you to look at life differently. So I want to thank once again everyone for your spending this time this Tuesday. I appreciate you all and for your support of Resilient by Nature. Thank you.
Hey, let me chime in on that for one quick second when we talk about Reggie's accomplishments. One thing that I know he's proud of, and maybe he's too humble to admit it in this vein, but this was an NFL Man of the Year. And so when you talk about your career and your accomplishments, we could talk about statistics, we can talk about championships, but the NFL Man of the Year award is bestowed on an NFL player for his community service and his community work. And Reggie won that award back in the mid 80s. And if you look at the who's who list of people who have won that award over 30, 40 years since it was established, it is just such an impressive list. And so for Reggie to be among that group, I think it really says something about the impact that he had as a player, a professional, and a community servant.
Thank you.
And could I also say that I'll see the both of you in Tampa for Super Bowl, where you'll do another signing. So I love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you once again, everybody, for your participation.
Thank you, and good night.
Later, Rocky. Rock steady.
All right. All right. All right. Thank you very much. All right.
Good job, everybody.
We could have gone on for another couple
I
hours.
know. I know.
No, that's good. Buddy.
'Cause you get two brothers like us that can get real long-winded.
No,